To learn more about the Marxist line, to get a hold of us, send something our way, please use the Reddit link below, reddit.com/r/Marxist_USCA. We encourage the entire Marxist community, regardless of what group or affiliation you're in, to use that subreddit and encourage serious discussion between Marxists.
Yeah, so this is our second show on YouTube. We've made the migration from Twitch. So if you're there with a blank screen right now, we're not coming to get you. So get on over here. Yeah, so this week we are, it's going to be theory and state heavy, but we are going to read a statement that are drafted from over the shootings this past week in Atlanta.
Yeah, and we'll be mainly focusing on the new seasonal issue of Prometheus.
Yeah, so let's read this statement. But first, yeah, I just want to give my thoughts, and maybe you can give yours after or before. But yeah, I mean, when I came across these statements of principles when something like this would happen, I didn't really reflect on the importance until now, until seeing what's going on in the community and seeing how fractured and how distorted some of the views are. And, I mean, so I guess, it may not mean so much in specific contexts, but I mean, I see the importance of making a clear distinction and a statement of principles on where we stand as a group.
Right.
So, yeah. So anyways, did you want to say something before I read this, or do you want to save your thoughts till after?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really see many statements from any of the groups or even individuals within the Marxist community. I saw a handful of Facebook posts of basically trying to unpack what just happened. And I wouldn't really say that either of them were developed enough to be considered a statement. But there does seem to be, I think there's definitely quite a few comrades out there that are, basically saying that this isn't just a case of like a lone like murderer that like lost it, right? Or a lone racist. But here in the United States, like Trump, I know, would give speeches talking about a China virus and promoting xenophobia, along with, I would say, the trade unions. I know, definitely a lot of coworkers have had very strong feelings of resentment toward China, which got especially worse with Trump, and then there's also this other there's definitely the anti-Asian side, right, of the murders, but then there's also an anti-woman and an
incel,
and an anti-sex worker side of it as well, where, and I think there's an aspect of religious fundamentalism and a misogyny in this kind of religious fundamentalism. I mean, there's misogyny in society as a whole, but I grew up in Texas, which is, a part of the Bible Belt, and Georgia and Florida are definitely a part of the Deep South Bible Belt as well. Very similar cultures, and the same big evangelical churches kind of run through all those states. And there's definitely one of the things that hit me was there's definitely a very puritanical aspect of these women are making me think lustful thoughts kind of thing, and and basically it's a crime against God, and therefore it's okay to basically kill them. And that's not like the first time that's happened. Like, and it doesn't just happen in the Deep South either. Like, I can think of like locally in the Washington area, there's like a very, very notorious serial killer named the Green River Killer.
Yeah.
Killed 50 sex workers in his killing spree, and basically the bodies would be found near the Green River. And so, and he was, I remember after he was like captured, because he was captured alive, and after he was captured, I remember like watching interviews and such, basically saying, oh, he was a church guy, he would go to church like, you know, every Sunday, and you would never suspect that he would kill these women, like, you know. And
I mean, the same, yeah, it's the same up here too. I mean, there was a guy named Robert Picton from Vancouver. He was a serial killer and killed, you know, tens. I don't know. I'm not sure how many he got convicted of, but convicted a bunch of prostitutes on his pig farm and fed them to the pigs. And there's a highway here also called the Highway of Tears with murdered Indigenous women.
right.
That are, many of them are supposedly sex workers too. And yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, I mean, it's not just America too. I mean, there's this look of both prostitutes and, you know, Indigenous people. It's a problem on both sides of the borders.
And there's like a kind of like puritanical perception that like sex workers that you know, and primarily women, I mean, because I mean I know that there's some male sex workers, but I don't think that they get really demonized nearly as much in society, you know. But I would say, like, you know, this is mainly the case for female sex workers, is that basically they get completely dehumanized, you know, like as if they're worthless, like women that work in strip clubs, for example, or you know, or like, you know, women that are that, you know, basically,
you know, in adult film industry too. Like, I mean,
right.
I wrote papers on it in school and stuff. And if you watch some of the documentaries, just women trying to get out of it, getting a job. I mean, it's hard to escape once you're stigmatized with that, and you shouldn't be.
Totally stigmatized and dehumanized, and like, and people say really awful stuff about these women who like really didn't ever hurt them, or, you know, like, you know, so, and a lot of them come from like abusive families and whatnot as well, and, you know, all kinds of,
yeah, and it's fucked up because I mean, those storylines become like plot lines within like adult film industry.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, Jenna Jameson came from that kind of family, but you know, it, you know, was sensationalized, and you know, it's kind of screwed up in that sense. You know, in the one sense, it's part of the plot lines, but then they're demonized on it at the other end of it. You know, it's fucked up. Yeah.
Yes.
So, anyways.
Yeah, so I mean, I just kind of thought, yeah, I did kind of think about that, like, after I heard about it, like, I and I don't want to, like, you know, take away from, like, you know, there's definitely like racism, like, with the, you know, associated with these murders, like, you know, there's definitely like a you know, there's a racist motivation there, and there's also like, you know, and there's racist motivations around, like, you know, like Asian people and Asian women and sex work, but then there's also kind of like this religious puritanical fundamentalist aspect as well, and there's a connection between like all of them, you know. So now yeah, and it's good that people are thinking about these connections, I think, and I think the other thing is that I've kind of noticed is there's, you know, the left has like loves to argue about things like semantics and loves to pick apart like just frivolous stuff that really doesn't really matter much. And so I don't want to really get into it too much, but like but I noticed that like some people that you know are really appalled by these murders, who are probably more liberal, I guess, but they're appalled by the murders, and they seem to clearly recognize that there is like racist motivation. And I noticed that sometimes they try to get involved in like these conversations with people that are, I'd say, you know, like kind of in the both in the Marxist community and I would say also kind of in the anarchist community, and both communities frankly overlap, but people like more liberal people will sometimes try to get involved in these conversations, and there's kind of like a hostile or like an overly defensive or an overly hostile reaction to something that they say. And sometimes they say something ignorant or whatever, but one thing that I've thought is like, well, like we have to learn how to interact with people that are like not woke, right? And
Yeah.
and because we want to build, we want to build the left. We're not trying to, you push people away, and it's like you're not going to be able to build a movement by doing that. We have to figure out a way that we can educate people better, as well as ourselves. And I understand like ourselves, we're not always, up to par as far as education goes too, but we have to be able to like not push everybody away who does not meet like our expectations of leftism or Marxism, because it's a big problem in the long run, in my opinion.
Definitely. I mean,
like
I said that. I said that. Yeah. I said that to you. Yeah. A few years ago when you started talking about this kind of project and stuff that, it's the left is definitely way more fractured and we should be principled, but not so rigid that we can't open up conversations with each other and the other side too, which it's become like that. It's just become this bickering back and forth and memes and all that instead of real discussion. So do you want to say anything else before we read this?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and read that?
Okay, so the Marxist line expresses its solidarity with women, sex workers, and those of Asian descent. Both Art and myself are both saddened and appalled at the murders of massage workers in Georgia. We both hope and expect for this movement to galvanize the anti-racist movement further. If there is a solidarity demonstration near you, we urge you to join it. The attack has also raised questions to the role of the Asian bourgeoisie in the United States by Asian American comrades, as well as the super exploitation and vulnerability of sex workers. Both Art and I agree that these are important conversations to have and develop, not simply as an intellectual exercise, but as a means of building real leadership, concrete organization, and proletarian solidarity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, have you heard any demonstrations coming up or being organized?
I think in Seattle there may be a demonstration coming up on Monday.
Okay.
And I'll see if I can find a link real quick.
Yeah, and post that in our.
And I know that there's. I'm guessing that there's multiple demonstrations coming up, right? Across the country over this. And let me see if I can find that Seattle event real quick, because that kind of hit me. I thought there was one, but maybe I don't see it now. But anyway, if there is an event near you, and we encourage you to go, I'll see if I can find the Seattle event. I'm not really sure if I'll be able to.
Yeah, I mean,
I
we can.
heard that there's one on Monday,
Yeah,
but sometimes these things do kind of move around, so it's
maybe we can keep an eye on this weekend, and if there's a bunch, we can start a thread in our subreddit and stuff.
yeah.
Or anybody, if anybody has some links, send it to us, and we'll start a subreddit for these demonstrations.
Yeah, and if you or your group has a statement that you'd like to share, you can share it to the subreddit, of course. Like it was created for the community to share these kinds of things. As well as things that you think are important to get involved in.
Definitely. Okay, so on to Theory and State of Movement, which we're going to be focusing on Prometheus's Spring Edition that just came out.
Yeah, so let me switch here.
Okay.
So we the last time I think we talked about Prometheus was like their last season. I think it was the winter season. So
It's been a while.
It's been quite a few months.
Yeah. But to be honest, I mean, I kind of like this approach better from magazines. You know, if they're going to put out stuff instead of putting out something every day, that's, I'd rather see some better written pieces than just a bunch of,
yeah,
pieces coming out. Not saying that this is like the best or anything, but just saying, that's just my general thoughts.
Yeah. So I noticed that Prometheus has like focused a lot this season on Rosa Luxemburg, and I guess the context is that it was recently Rosa Luxemburg's 150th birthday, and so this coincides with that. Now, so I noticed, so they have like, we have 4 different articles from Prometheus for the spring of 2021.
3 in a podcast.
Right. Three in a podcast, actually. Yeah. And, yeah. And so one deals with Rosa Luxemburg, and also Lenin in the question of, the right of the right of national self-determination.
I think this is not just I think it's a good piece for these times right now, especially within the community with everything that's been going on and the varying views.
Yeah, and then another talks about some letters that Luxemburg wrote and kind of how it was received. And another discusses the idea of a mass strike and some of her thoughts on a mass strike. Especially, I think it was it Hungary that it focused on? I want to say it was a Hungarian strike.
Oh, no. It was Georgia.
Oh, was it Georgia?
Oh, wait. Oh, no. That's our first article. Yeah, hold on here.
Maybe it was Belgium.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm reading it now, and I think it was Belgium. Okay, so it was Belgium.
And yeah, hold on. So maybe do you want to quickly, give a quick couple sentences about who Rosa Luxemburg was for people, just in case?
So Rosa Luxemburg was an important Marxist theorist who was around about the same time as Lenin in the early 20th century. And she was she was a German theorist, so she was in the Social Democratic Party of Germany, uh, and she was very important. She wrote like not a lot of different works on reform revolution and on the mass strike, and she was also an economist, um, and she occasionally
Anti-war activist.
yeah, anti-war activist, and she got into major like international debates. So she's definitely not someone to sleep on. Uh, now, um, and the debate on self-determination is one of them, and there's definitely some layers to this debate, I think, and I think the article does a good job in kind of peeling apart some of those layers of the debate.
Yeah, I agree because I was thinking I thought about some of these same issues during this, and they kind of brought them up well in this article, I think. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, there are definitely some some good points. And so what is the differing view of Rosa Luxemburg versus Lenin on this?
So I know that Lenin was like he was a firm advocate for the right of nations to self-determination.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember right, Luxemburg was far more skeptical because she was skeptical about taking that position because she was very distrustful of nationalism.
Yes.
And so that's where a lot of the discussion was kind of centered around.
Yeah. So I mean, to tease this apart here for a sec, I mean, to say, I mean, so both Lenin and Luxemburg were internationalist, but right. So, but
Right.
Lenin was more kind of nuanced in what would it be correct to say that they needed self-determination first in a country before they could realize this next stage.
Well, Lenin's argument was that communists should support a smaller nation that wanted to become independent from a larger nation, and that it had a right to do that, to become independent. So if I mean, one example was like the Ukraine from Russia. Yeah. The Ukraine is basically the breadbasket of Russia, but it's talked about its independence for years, and Lenin supported it. Another, there's a few other examples, and this debate goes back to like Engels and Marx with Ireland in particular, I know, and so Lenin was basically, he felt like he was taking like a very Marxist position with this, and the idea is that there is like nationalism involved in wanting to become independent from a bigger country, but it's not, if the masses want to do it, then they should be able to do it, because they're only going to learn from experience whether it's going to be helpful to them or not, like the independence. So if the masses in a given region want to be their own nation, like, let them do it, and then it's up to Marxists to point out, hey, we think that if you become your own nation, you're still going to be basically ruled by an upper class, so this doesn't change the situation. Like, you're still going to be ruled by an upper class. You're still going to be peasants, or you're still going to be, workers with crappy wages. That's not going to change. this is mainly going to benefit those in the upper class, and you're not going to get away with that. Like, I mean, get away from that, and that the only way to change things, to really change things, is through social revolution. And so Lenin was like, well, look, this is just like a learning experience, you know, and the masses have to sometimes go through that, and it's not like Marxists shouldn't oppose them wanting to take this step, because they're going to learn, you know. And if Marxists take the step against national self-determination, then what are they doing? Then they're actually taking the side of the bourgeoisie from the bigger country. Now, if the Marxists take the side to support separation, and so, you know, separation into their own country, then they're taking the side of the bourgeoisie of the smaller country. So it's not up to Marxists to take either side, but instead just to support the right of the masses to make the decision themselves, and then to give, like, basically a warning, because it's up to Marxists to create clarity. And so so you don't want to take the side of either bourgeoisie. And that was Lenin's big argument. Luxemburg's argument was against like self-determination. I think she was more skeptical of that. Now, one thing the article does mention, which I'm glad, and they only use the case of Georgia, and that's that okay, so after a revolution, right, and Russia was this huge empire. That was around for 1,000 years. So it wasn't like a small empire. And so it was actually an empire with different nations in the empire. And so, like, with, you know, dozens of ethnicities and nationalities. And so, so Georgia, for example, the Georgians had been basically bullied by everybody, and they wanted to become independent. And so the Soviets, and of course the counter-revolutionaries, were like, yeah, you don't want to be a part of Russia. You know. And so the counter-revolutionaries supported their independence, and so the Bolsheviks had to make a decision. Look, are we going to allow Georgia to break off, or are we going to keep them as a part of the territory that we're controlling? And because to keep them, that meant you have to, like, crush their army and take over. And so the Bolsheviks did the latter, and they took over. Yeah. And it's interesting because they mentioned that, like, there were like some lies and maybe half truths that were spread about how there was an uprising in Georgia, that, like, the masses wanted to join the Soviet Union. You know, and, like, information back then was a lot harder to come by than it is today.
So there was a 1924 anti-Soviet uprising in Georgia.
Yeah.
Which the authorities who suppressed this, which murdered 7,000 to 10,000 Georgians as a response. So who exactly would have ordered that?
I'm not sure if Lenin ordered that, or if Stalin did. I think Lenin ordered that, actually.
Yeah, because I was like,
and I think here, I mean, so here's the early 1920s, after the Civil War. Yeah. So after the Civil War, there were what's known as the Peasant Uprisings, and one of the biggest ones was in the southern side of the country, and there are multiple peasant uprisings, like all over the country, like little fires that couldn't be put out. And so the Soviets were basically given this difficult decision of like, are we going to crush these peasant uprisings, these little peasant armies all over the country, and to try to create stability, or are we going to let them go and basically snowball, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, it says, I mean, because I mean, it might have been Stalin, because I mean, we know, I mean, Lenin died in January
right,
of 20,
yeah,
right?
it might have
So
been Stalin, um, but this is, I see this as like basically a continuation of those peasant
snowball. Yeah.
uprisings.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
they were already like having this policy of crushing rebellions all over
Yeah.
the country because in order to prevent counter-revolution.
Yeah.
And the peasant uprisings were motivated primarily by the fact that the grain was being expropriated by the Bolsheviks in order to feed the workers in the cities and the army. And who made the grain? It was the peasants. So they had the monopoly on the food, and so they had the monopoly on the food, and the Bolsheviks couldn't pay for the food. So the only way to get the food, unless the peasants were feeling exceptionally charitable, which was never the case, they couldn't buy the food. So they basically sent armed soldiers to go and take it. And if you know anything about armies and soldiers, wherever soldiers go, it's generally not pretty, no matter whose soldiers they are. They rape and they pillage and they commit atrocities. Like soldiering, there's nothing glamorous about soldiers. Like, you know, it doesn't matter whose soldiers they are, like whether they're Bolshevik soldiers or capitalist soldiers, they're not.
Yeah.
They commit crimes. You know, they commit real like crimes against humanity.
Yeah. I mean, it's war.
Right.
It's
And
not pretty.
and they're being sent 1,000 miles away from their family. They're bitter. They've killed a bunch of people and saw a bunch of people die, and like,
and they're trained to be desensitized to hate the enemy.
Right. Yeah. They're all twisted up, and so that basically, so whenever you're sending an army anywhere where there's civilians, it's generally not going to turn out well. To say the least. And so, but Georgia's not the only country where they didn't like respect that right of self-determination, because you also have to look at like Estonia, and then there's also like there's a couple countries that are near Estonia, and these countries were also being used as basically a springboard by the white armies for counter-revolution against against the Soviets. And so these smaller nations kind of on the periphery, on the edge of Soviet Russia, like, yeah, they were declaring independence, but at the same time they were also basically allowing enemy troops to move through their territory. And so that was also a big concern. And in the chaos of the war, where like, people were literally sending messages with a horse and train, it's like the information's not all there. They're having to make all these like big time decisions. It's difficult to say, hey, they have the right of nations to, there's the right of nations to self-determination. We need to respect that right, and this is just like a big misunderstanding, etc. Like, it's difficult to be able to say that. Like, they have to make a decision, and the decision that they make, whether it's right or wrong, it's probably gonna mean thousands of lives. It's gonna affect thousands and thousands of lives.
Yeah. Do you think do you think both Lenin and Luxemburg had points in given
Yeah,
situations?
I think they both had points. Um, I tend to
But
lean
you
a
would
little bit.
take more with Lenin?
I think I lean a little bit more towards Lenin, and and I do think that there's an argument. Um, there's an argument to respect like self determination, even like after a revolution happens. For like like for example, if the United States were to have a revolution and Alaska and Hawaii wanted to become independent, or Texas even, like I think there's an argument to allow that to happen. Now, if that if that independent nation were to then basically allow an enemy army to basically use its territory as a means of counter revolution to attack, then yeah, I could see the argument to to basically crush it, right? Because now it's not just becoming independent; it's becoming a threat, of a counter revolutionary threat, and I think that kind of complicates the situation a little more.
Sure. All right. So, rounding off this article, I mean, what is it? Do you have anything to say about the lessons for today? The end,
Yeah, one
the
thing
end
about
here, and
the article here by
how it
Prometheus.
applies to anything today.
What? Yeah, one thing that I was disappointed is they did not mention any of the more recent examples of self determination, like Syria, like Ukraine, like Catalonia, like like if you look at what else is there? I mean, those are the big ones I can think of like
Baltic
right away.
region.
There's even like maybe an argument for Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And like, and so I think I'm surprised they didn't mention any of that. Or mention, because, and I know that probably would have been like kind of a deeper conversation to have, but I think that's far more relevant conversation to have.
Yeah.
Because it's like, do the Hong Kongers, do they have a right to self determination? Because because basically Hong Kong's a city, right? It's just a city, but it's a huge city, but there's countries that are there's a few countries that are smaller than Hong Kong, way smaller than Hong Kong, especially like by person and GDP and all that, like, and so, and yeah, Hong Kong doesn't have an army, but does it really need an army? I mean, that doesn't really make a nation, does it? So, I mean, there's questions like that, and Syria as well. Like one thing I am kind of glad is they had a quote here somewhere. I don't think I'll be able to find it, but it basically, I think it was from here, and I think it was from like Engels, and it was basically somewhere along the lines of, even if the masses were to break off to make their own nation, and the nation was like politically backwards, right?
Yeah.
They still should have that right to do that. Yeah. And I think that applies to Syria, because I know that there was a big argument with Syria that, like, oh, well, they're gonna try to create a state with Islamic laws, and so therefore, they should be crushed.
Yeah.
And which, maybe, but
well, yeah, I mean, it was difficult at first, but I mean,
right.
Yeah, either to see what was going on, but either way, how what's his face has acted. Syria, what's his name? Fuck. The leader of Syria.
Oh, Assad?
Yeah, Assad. However, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think we can agree that he's, yeah, I mean, he's not fit,
Right.
whatever happens. Anyways, that from a Marxist point. Anyways, let's move on to this. Anything else on that, or you want to move on to this next one on
Yeah,
Kraus and Benjamin on
yeah,
Luxemburg?
so yeah, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah. So this is regarding a letter Luxemburg wrote from prison to her friend Sophie. How do you say
Liebknecht.
that? Yeah, and that's the, what is it? The second husband of Karl
Karl
Liebknecht?
Liebknecht, yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, what do you make of this?
I wish that they posted the full letter here
Yeah.
so I could actually read the letter. The letter I think sounds more interesting than the article. But as I understand it, the letter was published, and it kind of made the gossip rounds, and basically, some of
That's
the
a good word. I couldn't figure out a word to say it, but it sounded a little bit. Yeah, it sounded like it. Yeah, it was like a little bit gossipy back in the day.
right, and it was like, hey, look at Rosa Luxemburg. She cares a lot about this this buffalo.
Awful.
Yeah, that was beaten by this soldier, and and she cares a lot about like animal cruelty, and so so there was some fun that was made out of her for that, and like I think she called, like, I haven't read the letter, so don't quote me if the letter doesn't say this, but it says that she called the buffalo a brother, and it's interesting. Again, I kind of wish that the full letter was published so I can actually read it and, like, get a better opinion on it. But
Yeah,
instead,
I was gonna go to the Marxist Internet Archive and see if they had that, but maybe I'll do that later, because it doesn't really. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have the link here, does it, to the actual letter?
no, it doesn't. And I think that's kind of a serious weakness. Like, it's just like a bunch of reactions to it, and then the gossip around that. And one thing the article kind of shows is that there is a lot of, like, weakness to, like, I think the Marxist community back then as well.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I was like, is that what this is showing here?
Yeah, and I don't really know if that was the intention of the author, but that's kind of the big thing I took out of it. Is that, things are really messed up. Like, like, people thought it was okay to, like, beat the crap out of animals and that kind of thing,
and then mock somebody for pointing it out and caring about it.
Right. And yeah, and the conclusions of the author, I mean, I thought they were weak. So, like, it's, it's that, oh, well, letters can be subversive even if they're not political. And and it's kind of a very gossipy conclusion, in my opinion, as well. And I'm not totally against gossip. I mean, gossip has its, you can learn things from gossip.
Yeah, I mean, you can learn. I just found it. I found this article a little bit weird in what it was what it was trying to say here, because, well, I mean, I knew what it was kind of saying, but I mean, I'm just saying, yeah, I mean, the conclusion was a little bit, yeah, I didn't subversive without being overtly political. Yeah, I don't know about, yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of like a stretch, right? To there seems to be some stretches here to talk about this gossip. But I still think it's interesting, and one of the main things I thought was interesting was it seems to show that there were some serious problems going on. Like there's, like there's definitely a section of the Marxist community that definitely seemed very fucked up back then, and it's not as rosy as some.
Yeah.
No pun intended. It's not as rosy as some comrades like to depict it.
Yeah. Or yeah, they tend over
Right.
romanticize.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, next article. Rosa Luxemburg and the mass political strike. Yeah. So yeah, so as I understand it, I mean, she sees, that there needs to be a clear discussion about, or, making distinctions between an industrial mass strike and a political mass strike. It says in the article. So, I mean, can you really tell me, what would be the difference between these two?
I think they can overlap, but I'm pretty sure like a political mass strike would be for something like political rights, basically.
Like something that happened this week, right? But
yeah.
that also has something that's overlapping because it's industrial. I mean, it's workers kind of strike, but not on the not on a mass level.
People not having the right to vote. Like in Myanmar, or I guess like civil rights. And
yeah, because we've had this discussion before about about political strikes and stuff, and I mean, and I think I think they do make a good point about having an educated political mass. So I mean, do you think there's there's a right time and place for, do you agree that we shouldn't just be calling for mass action all the time? And then because we've had articles before where it says we need to call for these mass action, and then some political consciences can arise out of these? Or do you think that political conscience must be there first for the most important sections?
Yeah,
before we lead?
I think before you fire a gun, you need to make sure you know how to aim it and know how to use it and make sure that it's loaded. And yeah. I think that a lot of people in the left don't understand those, that simple principle.
Yeah. So, because I mean, I thought, when I was reading this article too, I mean, I'd think about like the Arab Spring.
Right.
So I guess that would kind of be like a cross between self-determination and mass political strike, right?
Right.
So where the two meet. And so, I mean, would you consider something like that? I mean, what did you think about that when it happened? I mean, were you very supportive off the bat?
I was very supportive right off the bat, and I think I don't have any regrets over supporting it. I think
neither
I think it was the right thing to support at the time, and I mean, I feel like it's been pretty vindicated. I think it's done a lot of good. The Arab Spring, like, people see that kind of mass action, and that's something that didn't just come out of a vacuum. It didn't just
no,
it wasn't like organized in a week. Like, I mean, those countries were under dictatorships for decades and decades.
Yeah, and I mean, if change isn't going to come from mass action,
right?
Then I mean, then it's not going to come from. I mean, then it's either mass action or an overthrow by a foreign government. And if you're not going to support the masses, then I mean, you're just going to be you're going to have.
And there's an argument that there wasn't, like, people, like there wasn't a Marxist organization in the Arab Spring that was prepared to deal with it, right? I mean, I think there's a strong argument for that actually, but
Yeah.
So I see it as largely spontaneous, but at this and yeah, there wasn't like a working class political organization that could influence it or could prepare it sufficiently, but at the same time I think it was good. I think it made a tremendous impact in the region and the world.
Me too. I mean, I said before too. I mean, before people, you know, they didn't have a workers, organized like that, but they still needed to realize for themselves this, democratic rights before anything else. Either whether it turns out, long, good or bad down the long run. I mean, it needs to be realized by the people of the nation first, I think, before they can move to the next step in their development.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this article, she talks about the Belgian general strike in 1893. I mean, do you know much about this Belgian?
I don't know much about the Belgium strike in 1893. I mean, there were several strikes in the late 19th century, like major strikes in late 19th century, early 20th century.
After the big onset of industrialization across Europe.
Right, and including in the United States.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
So there are big strikes, and I think that there's some good points made by the author of this article. A lot of technical things, but another thing is that's I think that mass strikes are kind of like over romanticized and over fetishized in the left in general, like by Marxists and anarchists, like it's like, yeah, there's instances where it is possible to, like, I mean, I think in Europe and in India and other countries, I think it is possible. I don't think it's always gonna be like up to a mass strike to create a revolution. Like, I think that strikes have a role. I'm glad that the author mentioned it's really important to have an educated working class. I think that's very important. And that there needs to be a political organization. I think she was quoting Luxemburg on that, but she was basically in agreement. But I think the main thing holding things back, as I see it now, is there's a lack of organization and there's a lack of education with the working class, like a lack of consciousness. And so, like, hoping for the next big strike, it's like, okay, well, we're hoping to shoot that gun, but we don't know how to aim it or where to aim it or how to use it, and it's not loaded.
Yeah.
So it's, and
that, I mean, that's definitely where, I mean, I see the utmost important in developing that educated part within like places like America and stuff, compared to mass strikes like the Arab Spring and stuff.
Yeah, and I see, like, at least, I mean, I don't know how it is in Canada really, as far as the sentiment. It's been a while since I visited, but I know, like, in the United States, I'm very skeptical that a general strike would happen anytime soon. Like, I just don't see the consciousness that's needed for something like that, and I don't see any pressure that could, like, motivate, say, the union leaders or to ever do something like that in the near future. Like, there would really have to be like a serious movement, like an earth-shaking movement here. I mean, in Europe, in North Africa, in the Middle East, I think it's a totally different story. Like, I think it's far more, I could see that kind of thing happening far more likely. But there's other issues. Like, the main issue is like, well, do you have an organization that's going to take advantage of that situation? It's going to be able to lead the strike. It's going to, that's basically going to be able to get on the forefront and to be the tribune that the working class needs in that kind of time. And I don't. I mean, we've looked. We try to cover groups all over the world, and I mean, I don't really see any group in the Marxist community, or the anarchist community that's able to fulfill that kind of role. It's basically, let's roll the dice and hope for the best at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's. I had one more question here about this.
This author, though, Rita, is it Vacus? She, I think she did a pretty good job writing this article out. It's very clear.
Yeah, I did like this article. It was, I felt like, there was,
and she makes good points in it.
I didn't watch the video, but I mean, I think, is there, how long's the video? Did you watch it?
I think it's like about 15 minutes, and I'm pretty sure it's just her reading the article.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. No, it was some good points in here.
So, lastly, so Prometheus had a podcast discussion with Platypus London.
Yeah, I forgot about this one, and I only got a few minutes into it, so you'll have to give us the rundown on this.
So, so they talk about
Platypus is affiliated. Sorry, Platypus is affiliated with Prometheus, right? That's what I
would say,
I
like,
heard.
loosely. They're kind of another think tank within the community. Okay. I consider Prometheus and Platypus as kind of like think tanks.
I mean, do you think they're kind of like Cosmonaut?
Yeah, kind of like Cosmonaut. So I don't think that Cosmonaut is as much of a group, like as it is just a platform to publish stuff.
Sure. Okay. All right. Okay.
And but I think of like Platypus and this Prometheus as more of like set groups that are kind of built like think tanks and or study groups. And I think, which I don't have much of a problem with in itself. Now I'm glad that they posted this discussion. It's a little hard to listen to, but
why is that? Just monotonous?
Or it's kind of monotonous, and there's like, it's kind of like there's sort of, it's kind of like being on the outside of an inside joke, and the inside joke is the Labour Party of Britain.
Yeah, I started getting that. I got that far, and I was like, "Is this another talk on Corbynism?"
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is.
Get over it already.
That's exactly what it is. And I was hoping that it was more than that, but it isn't really. It's something that I would say a lot of comrades in the community are completely obsessed with.
Yeah,
and to their detriment. And that's all they can think about as far as, well, like what kind of political work can we do? How do we organize the working class? How do we organize with each other? And it's like, no matter what question they ask, right? Like if you were to make a flow chart of all the questions they ask, it's like all roads lead to the Labor Party for them.
Yeah.
Every road, no matter what question they ask, it all leads back to the Labor Party. And yeah, and I think it's kind of sad, actually, that this is like that they can't think outside the box here, in my opinion. Like they criticize Weekly Worker because like Weekly Worker is talking about like, let's not have a road that leads back to the Labor Party.
Yeah.
and they know that like that it's like that this is an issue. Like I mean, it seems like they know that this is an issue. Like that, like they mention how like millennials in the anti-war movement were basically you know, there's a militant anti-war movement, and these millennials had a choice of voting for a candidate for the Socialist Workers Party or voting for Jeremy Corbyn in the election. And so, and they're like, and those millennials, they moved to the right because they voted for Corbyn, even though the SWP is dog shit and they're raping women. And it's like, and it's like, listen to yourselves. Like,
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it is, anyway, I was, I mean, I'm not surprised at all. Like, this is.
How long did they drone on for?
I think it was about an hour or two.
Hour? Okay.
Yeah. But, like, you know, to me, it's like, I think, you know, I mean, you and me, we can't avoid talking about Corbyn or the Labor Party. And that's because, you know, we're talking about the Marxist community. And there's this section, especially in the UK, where every road leads to, you know, every road of discussion leads to the Labor Party. But, I mean, I think we both concluded that, like, no, that's, that's not, like, you know, we can't, like, have every discussion lead to what do we do with the Labor Party? What is the Labor Party? How do we work within the Labor Party? Like, you know, what kind of tactics can we use in the Labor Party? And it's like, it's just a dead end. And it's proven it. I mean, it's the Labor Party's been there for 100 years. It's like a puzzle, you know, like a giant, really complex puzzle. And it's like, how can I crack the puzzle? And it's like, Marxists that get involved in this puzzle lose. They lose their minds over this puzzle, trying to crack open this puzzle box to get inside to the Labor Party. We're going to figure it out. Our generation's going to be the one to figure out this puzzle. It's like, I watched this documentary, Andrew. It was kind of a really cheesy history show type documentary on Netflix.
Yeah.
You know, the kind where they got the bad actors and they act out everything that they're that they have the historian
so like
narrator
80% of the stuff on Netflix.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because like Netflix is trying to become the History Channel. And so they got the cheesy historian and he gives like 3 sentences and then they have the bad actors try to act out whatever the historians, you know, summarized.
Yeah.
And it was on Constantinople. And yeah, and so, and if you haven't seen it, I think it's pretty interesting. But
I do like I do like history.
Yeah,
and bad acting from history movies.
So Constantinople is, you know, that's present day Istanbul, and it's right there on the sliver of land that goes from the Middle East into Europe, right? Is that called an isthmus when it?
Yeah,
I think maybe. Okay, I it's been a long time since I took geography, so.
Yeah.
So it's basically on that sliver of land that goes into Europe, and it was basically like it was basically the second Roman capital. So Rome had like basically 2 capitals, and one was Rome, of course, and the other was Constantinople.
Yeah.
And so and for a while it basically had like two emperors. And interestingly enough, I didn't know this until I watched the cheesy documentary. Constantinople like was around after basically Rome was no longer the Roman Empire. So it's basically like the last refuge of the Roman Empire. And because it had like the last Roman emperor, like, you know, who descended from emperors XYZ. And so so anyway, so Constantinople was this city, right? And this magnificent city, Roman city, and it has like, you know, it's in a territory where it's always being, you know, at war, right? It's right next to the Balkans. It's right next to like Turkey. It's like, it's not like prime. I mean, it's prime real estate, and that's why it's got this issue, right? And so, it has. So the Romans had to figure out a way to defend it, and so they built like 3 or 4 layers of massive walls around the city.
Yeah.
So any army that would have to attack Constantinople, it's like they had to cross a moat, and then they had to break down the first wall, and then they had to break down the second wall, and then the third wall, and then the fourth wall before they even got inside the city. And so by then the army would be dead.
So is this your analogy to the Labor Party?
No, it gets
Party?
better. Okay, so this is basically a city that's impossible to conquer.
Yeah.
Right? Eventually it was conquered, but that's beside the point. So until the point it was conquered, there were 27 attempts to take it over.
Yeah.
And everyone failed. And every time there was a new attempt, whoever was the king, you know, or emperor or whatever that was trying to take over Constantinople was like, I'm going to be the guy. We're going to be the army that's going to do it this time.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And eventually Constantinople was like, you know, overtaken by the Ottomans. The Ottomans almost failed. They were like on their last leg when they took it over.
Yeah.
And they had cannons that were 30 feet long.
That's
the
biggest cannon.
Biggest cannons in the world, in like world history. The Ottomans custom built to take Constantinople, and they still almost got defeated. So that's kind of how I see the Labor Party. Is it's like, okay, the Labor Party is like Constantinople, and it'd be pretty nice to take over, but it's like sometimes it's probably best just to go around.
Yeah.
Instead of to try to take it over.
Yeah. All right, that was a great analogy, Art. Hey, did you hear that, Labor Party advocates? Fuck, go around. All right.
So, I think that does it for the show.
All right. Okay. Yeah. If you have any, so if you have any statements that you want to post on the Georgia murders or any protests coming up, check out our subreddit and post it there. Yeah. And closing remarks, Art?
Yeah, I don't have anyone. Thanks for watching, everybody, and
yeah.
And as always, we welcome your participation, and please please subscribe and like and hit the bell on the YouTube video, and that will alert you to any live feeds that we have, or any videos that we might publish in the future.
Yeah, see you next week.